I think increasingly we're going to see international brands coming into these markets, acquiring local strong strong companies and strong brands, and we're going to see the South African market becoming a lot more global, and there are going to be a lot more of the global brands. I think we've seen some successes in that space, but we've also seen some failures. I think that we know that Mars hasn't been particularly successful here. Pepsi has had a number of goes at it. So I think the way that international brands come into South Africa is really a big determinant as to how successful they are. I think the first thing to say is that Dubai is not Middle East. Our business is a Middle Eastern business. But Dubai in a way is a little bit like Cape Town. Cape Town feels very different to the rest of Africa, doesn't it? The biggest market in the Middle East, in fact, is Saudi Arabia, where we have 25 million people, and that's where we do a considerable amount of our business. So yes, the markets are very different, but there's actually quite a few similarities as well. I think what I see in terms of similarities between South Africa and the Middle East is the fact that the markets are emerging. There's an incredible sort of ambition and growth potential in the markets. They're both focus markets for WPP. They are focus markets in terms of where WPP, who are our holding company, are going to find growth. So I think there's a link there, a natural link there. They're both developing emerging markets. What I also see as a sort of similarity in the two markets is the fact that they are both very young markets. There's a very high percentage of young people, and that really is a big driver in terms of how branding is done. The percentage of young people in South Africa is not quite as high as Middle East, but in the Middle East it runs as high as sort of 60% of the people in some markets like Saudi Arabia are under the age of 25. So the youth and the young people are a big part of the focus of brands and how we evolve brands to become more relevant to young people. So that's a big similarity. I think we also deal with the same sorts of challenges as South Africa does in terms of growing our own homegrown brands that we're aspiring to take out into international markets. So if you look at companies like Emirates Airline, there's a company that today is a global brand, and I think you can say the same thing about Investec. You could probably say the same thing about Barloworld. I think South Africa has given birth to some incredible brands that have become true global brands, and the Middle East has the same sorts of aspirations. But on the other side of the coin, I think we're also target markets for big global brands to come into and grow and develop their own presence here. And I think we get this. So the sorts of conversations we have in Middle East and in South Africa are very similar. How can South African brands become stronger, more regional and more global? So South African brands, first of all, stepping into Africa and then becoming more global. And how do we effectively manage international brands coming into our markets? And that's what we get involved in. Those are the sorts of conversations we get involved in because it's a strategic conversation around how the process and the brand is managed rather than purely a design question. I think SAB is probably the brand we're working with most prolifically. And by the way, SAB, we have 10 global, what we call KCPs. So they're key client partnerships. These are brands that Simon and the executive team literally study and look at. Every single quarter we look at. We strategically build these brands. They're very critical to our business, and SAB is one of those. So currently we're building SAB's brands into Africa. So we don't only look after Castle in South Africa, Black Label, Castle Light, and Castle Milk Stout. Those are the core brands we've developed and are developing in South Africa, but we are developing brands in Botswana and up into Africa as well. So we're really involved in that, and we also have quite a strong business in Nigeria as well. We work on some big clients in Nigeria, particularly in the financial sector. We've developed the brands for some of the biggest financial institutions, including First Bank, which is the biggest bank in Nigeria, and actually is listed in London as well. Or has a London office. I'm not sure if they're listed, but they have a London holding company as well. We've worked on a number of local sort of oil brands like Con Oil and Oando, downstream and upstream. So, you know, petrol forecourts and that sort of thing. We've developed telecoms brands like Glow, which is a competitor to MTN in the market. So we've done a lot of local brands in Nigeria as well.